It started with a simple wind chime. A small, metal wood piece I had picked up at a craft fair, nothing fancy, just something to add a bit of charm to my front porch. The sound was gentle, calming, the kind of melody that made you feel at peace while sipping coffee in the morning. But for Karen Whitmore, my HOA-obsessed, control-freak neighbor, it was apparently the sound of pure evil. The first time she complained, I thought she was joking. "You need to take those things down," she snapped from her driveway, arms crossed tight. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my wind chimes? They're disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood," she hissed. I blinked. "They're wind chimes, Karen." Her expression darkened. "You don't understand. They attract spirits." I choked. "Wait, what?" Karen leaned in, lowering her voice. "Those things summon negative energy. I will not allow my property to be infected by your occult objects." I stared. "Karen," I said slowly, "they're literally just pieces of metal and wood." She gasped, clutching her pearls like I had just cursed her entire bloodline. "If you don't remove them," she snapped, "I'll be forced to report this to the HOA." And with that, she stomped off. I laughed. Surely, even Karen couldn't make a federal case over wind chimes. Right? Wrong. 3 days later, an official letter from the HOA appeared in my mailbox. Notice of noise violation. Unauthorized outdoor decorations. Dear homeowner, we have received a complaint regarding excessive noise originating from wind chimes on your property. Per HOA regulations, all exterior decorations that cause disturbances are subject to review. Please remove the wind chimes immediately to avoid fines. Sincerely, Homeowners Association Compliance Committee. I burst out laughing. Lisa, my next-door neighbor, peeked over the fence. "What's so funny?" I waved the letter. "Karen actually reported my wind chimes to the HOA." Lisa's eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "She's actually lost it." But Karen? She was just getting started. Lisa and I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. Heavy checkmark. I was ready to fight back. Heavy checkmark. Lisa had already gathered neighbor testimonies in my favor. Heavy checkmark. Karen, well, she showed up with a literal stack of printed-out complaints. The moment we walked into the HOA clubhouse, Karen was already at the front, addressing the board. "These wind chimes are a menace," she declared dramatically. The board members, most of whom had never received a noise complaint before in their lives, blinked at her in confusion. "Mrs. Whitmore," Alan, the HOA president, said cautiously, "what exactly is the issue?" Karen threw up her hands. "They summon spirits." The room fell dead silent. Alan coughed. "I'm sorry, did you say spirits?" Karen nodded furiously. "Yes, I've done my research. The vibrations attract unseen forces. If we allow this dark energy into our community, we're all at risk." Lisa whispered to me, "Bro, she sounds unhinged." I nodded. Then Alan sighed. "Okay, well, does anyone else have an issue with the wind chimes?" Lisa stood up. "In fact," she said loudly, "many of us like them. They're peaceful." A few other neighbors nodded in agreement. Karen gasped. "You support this?" she shrieked. Alan rubbed his temples. "Mrs. Whitmore, there is no rule against wind chimes. Unless they're causing an actual nuisance, like keeping people awake at night, I don't think we can enforce this complaint." Karen's eye twitched. Then she turned to me. "You," she hissed. "You're corrupting this neighborhood." I grinned. "Karen," I said, "they're wind chimes." She let out a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a scream. And then she stormed out. But I knew Karen wasn't done yet. She never backed down that easily. The next morning, Lisa knocked on my door. "Dude," she said, holding up her phone. "She's on Facebook." I took her phone and read the post. Heavy checkmark. Karen had gone full conspiracy mode. Heavy checkmark. She claimed I was polluting the community's spiritual balance. Heavy checkmark. She urged people to rise up against the chime menace. The best part? The comments were legendary. Heavy checkmark. "Karen, are you serious?" Heavy checkmark. "It's just wind chimes, not a demon portal." Heavy checkmark. "I like them, actually. Maybe you should just move?" And then? Someone posted a petition. Heavy checkmark, keep the wind chimes, stop HOA Karen. Within 24 hours? Heavy checkmark, over 100 signatures. And just like that, Karen had officially lost. A week later, another letter arrived from the HOA. Final ruling, wind chimes complaint dismissed. Dear homeowner, after reviewing the complaint as well as community feedback, we have determined that the wind chimes do not violate HOA policy. No further action is required on your part. Additionally, moving forward, repeated unfounded complaints will result in review for potential harassment violations. Sincerely, Homeowners Association Compliance Committee. Lisa read the letter twice. She grinned. Bro, they just banned Karen from filing complaints. And just like that, Karen was defeated. Again. A few weeks later, Lisa handed me a gift. A brand new wind chime. Engraved on the bottom, in honor of HOA Karen, may she find peace somewhere else. I laughed. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For a few weeks, everything was peaceful. Heavy checkmark, Karen was silent. Heavy checkmark, the wind chime stayed up. Heavy checkmark, no new HOA complaints. Then one morning, they were gone. My wind chimes disappeared. Lisa gasped. Bro, Karen stole them. I clenched my fists. Then it's time for a stakeout. Heavy checkmark, Lisa set up a security camera on my porch. Heavy checkmark, we waited. Heavy checkmark, and then? At 3:17 a.m., the camera caught her. Heavy checkmark, Karen, dressed in all black. Heavy checkmark, sneaking onto my porch. Heavy checkmark, ripping down the wind chimes like a deranged raccoon. Lisa screamed, laughing. Dude, she's a chime thief. I grinned. Time to return the favor. Heavy checkmark, I printed screenshots of the footage. Heavy checkmark, posted them all over the neighborhood. Heavy checkmark, titled, Wanted, the Wind Chime Bandit. Karen lost her mind. Heavy checkmark, she stormed into the HOA office. Heavy checkmark, claimed she was being framed. Heavy checkmark, the HOA fined her for trespassing. Lisa smirked. Bro, she's officially on HOA probation. And just like that, Karen was defeated. Again. To celebrate, Lisa and I installed. Heavy checkmark, 10 times more wind chimes. Heavy checkmark on every house that signed the petition. Heavy checkmark, the whole street sounded like a magical wind orchestra. Karen? She moved out a month later. Lisa handed me one last gift. A custom wind chime. Engraved on the bottom? In memory of HOA Karen, may she never return. I laughed. Because if another Karen ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was Karen-free. Heavy checkmark, no HOA complaints. Heavy checkmark, no insane fines. Heavy checkmark, no wind chime theft. Then one morning, Lisa ran up to my house, holding her phone. Dude, she gasped, Karen's house just sold. I raised an eyebrow. To who? Lisa gulped. The new owner? She whispered. HOA Valerie. Karen was bad. But Valerie? She was worse. Heavy checkmark, a former real estate agent. Heavy checkmark, friends with the HOA president. Heavy checkmark, obsessed with preserving property values. The moment she moved in, she declared war on my wind chimes. 1 week later, an official letter from the HOA appeared in my mailbox. Heavy checkmark, exterior noise violation, HOA citation number 001. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes exceeding acceptable decibel levels. Heavy checkmark, failure to comply will result in escalating fines. Lisa snatched the letter. Bro, she's trying to out Karen. I sighed. Then let's show her what happens when you mess with the wind chime army. Heavy checkmark, Lisa started a new petition. Heavy checkmark, we installed more wind chimes on every house. Heavy checkmark, we set up a wind chime parade in the neighborhood. Valerie lost her mind. Heavy checkmark, she tried to get the police involved. Heavy checkmark, the cops literally laughed at her. Heavy checkmark, the HOA board started ignoring her complaints. And then? She made her final mistake. Heavy checkmark, Valerie wrote an angry post on Facebook. Heavy checkmark, it backfired. People mocked her. Heavy checkmark, a local news station picked up the story. The headline? Local HOA nightmare tries to ban wind chimes, faces community revolt. Lisa grinned. Bro, she just got Karen'd. And just like that, Valerie was defeated. Heavy checkmark. Valerie was voted off the HOA board. Heavy checkmark. A new rule was passed. No complaints about wind chimes allowed. Heavy checkmark. The whole neighborhood celebrated. Lisa handed me one last gift. A custom wind chime. Engraved on the bottom? In memory of HOA Valerie, may she find peace far away. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For weeks, everything was quiet. Heavy checkmark. No Karen. Heavy checkmark. No Valerie. Heavy checkmark. The wind chime stayed up. Then one night, Lisa ran up to my house, panting. Bro, she gasped, I just overheard an HOA meeting. I frowned. And? Lisa gulped. They're planning something big. Heavy checkmark. The HOA board was furious about losing the wind chime battle. Heavy checkmark. They wanted revenge. Heavy checkmark. They had a new plan, community modernization. Lisa waved the leaked documents. Heavy checkmark. They're trying to ban non-approved decorative items. Heavy checkmark. They're calling it a beautification initiative. Heavy checkmark. Dude, they're going to ban your wind chimes. Again. I clenched my fists. Then it's time for the ultimate counterattack. Heavy checkmark. I rallied the entire neighborhood. Heavy checkmark. We started a counter-petition. Save our wind chimes. Heavy checkmark. Lisa got a lawyer to investigate the HOA's shady practices. And then? We played our trump card. Heavy checkmark. We leaked the HOA's secret plans to the media. Heavy checkmark. A local news station showed up. Heavy checkmark. The headline? HOA tries to ban wind chimes, community fights back. Lisa grinned. Bro, they just lost the public. The HOA president resigned the next day. And just like that, the HOA was officially powerless. Heavy checkmark. A new HOA rule was passed. Wind chimes are permanently allowed in the community. Heavy checkmark. All HOA fines were revoked. Heavy checkmark. The HOA board was restructured, with actual sane people. Lisa handed me one last gift. A gold-plated wind chime. Engraved on the bottom? In memory of the HOA war, may they never rise again. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to take control, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For weeks, everything was peaceful. Heavy checkmark. The wind chime stayed up. Heavy checkmark. The HOA was powerless. Heavy checkmark. Lisa and I finally relaxed. Then, a certified letter arrived at my door. Lisa ripped it open, and her jaw dropped. Notice of legal action, HOA versus my name. The HOA is suing you for violating community noise ordinances and disrupting neighborhood harmony. You are ordered to remove all wind chimes within 30 days or face legal consequences. Lisa stared at me. Bro, they're suing you. Over wind chimes. I grinned. Then let's destroy them in court. Heavy checkmark. Lisa hired the best lawyer we could find. Heavy checkmark. We gathered evidence. Every petty complaint. Every violation notice. Heavy checkmark. We prepared to expose the HOA's corruption in front of a judge. And the best part? We discovered something huge. Heavy checkmark. The HOA had been illegally collecting fines for years. Heavy checkmark. They had no legal authority to enforce noise complaints. Heavy checkmark. They had violated state homeowner laws. Lisa smirked. Bro, they're about to get wrecked. Heavy checkmark. The HOA president showed up in a suit, looking smug. Heavy checkmark. Our lawyer dropped a 400-page legal brief exposing them. Heavy checkmark. The judge raised an eyebrow. Judge, wait, you're suing someone over wind chimes? HOA lawyer, it's a matter of community integrity, Your Honor. Lisa, whispering, this is embarrassing for them. Then, our lawyer handed the judge a thick stack of evidence. Heavy checkmark. Illegal HOA fines. Heavy checkmark. Falsified noise complaints. Heavy checkmark. Misuse of homeowner funds. The judge sighed. HOA, you're not only dismissing this case, but I am ordering an audit of your finances. Lisa choked laughing. Dude, they just played themselves. Heavy checkmark. The lawsuit was dismissed. Heavy checkmark. The HOA was ordered to repay thousands in illegal fines. Heavy checkmark. Half the board members resigned. And the best part? Heavy checkmark, the HOA was permanently stripped of all power to regulate noise complaints. Lisa handed me a golden wind chime. Engraved on the bottom? In memory of the HOA. Gone, but not missed. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For months, the neighborhood was peaceful. Heavy checkmark, no HOA fines. Heavy checkmark, no Karen-level complaints. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes rang freely in the breeze. Then, Lisa ran up to my house, holding a flyer. "Bro," she said, "they're back." I frowned and read the flyer. Introducing the Community Preservation Committee, CPC. Our mission: protect property values and ensure our neighborhood remains a beautiful, peaceful place to live. New guidelines will be introduced soon. Meet your committee leader, Valerie Whitmore. I blinked. "Lisa," I said, "that's literally just the HOA with a different name." Lisa clenched her fists. "Bro, they're trying to reboot the HOA." Heavy checkmark, the CPC had no legal authority, but they acted like they did. Heavy checkmark, they sent out compliance letters to intimidate homeowners. Heavy checkmark, they started knocking on doors, demanding people follow their guidelines. Lisa stormed over to my house, fuming. "Bro, Valerie just tried to fine me for lawn non-uniformity." I sighed. "They're really trying to do this again?" Lisa smirked. "Time for round 2. Heavy checkmark, we called a neighborhood meeting. Heavy checkmark, we printed the old court ruling proving the HOA was legally dead. Heavy checkmark, we put up a new petition, ban the fake HOA. And then? We went public. Heavy checkmark, Lisa contacted the local news. Heavy checkmark, a journalist covered the CPC's shady tactics. Heavy checkmark, headline: defeated HOA attempts sneaky comeback, fails miserably. Valerie was furious. Heavy checkmark, she tried to deny everything. Heavy checkmark, the news crew pulled out the legal documents. Heavy checkmark, she stormed out of the interview. Lisa grinned. "Bro, they just exposed themselves on live TV." And just like that, the fake HOA collapsed. Heavy checkmark, a new neighborhood rule was passed. No HOA, committee, or similar governing body may ever be formed again. Heavy checkmark, Valerie sold her house and left. Heavy checkmark, the CPC was permanently disbanded. Lisa handed me one last gift. A wind chime shaped like a tombstone. Engraved on the bottom? "Rip HOA. Gone. Never forgotten. Never missed." I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For a year, the neighborhood was Karen-free. Heavy checkmark, no HOA. Heavy checkmark, no fake committees. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes ringing in total freedom. Then, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. Lisa peeked over my shoulder as I opened it. And what I read made my stomach drop. Notice of acquisition. Evergreen Residential Holdings. Dear homeowner, we are pleased to announce that Evergreen Residential Holdings has acquired your community. To ensure the long-term value of our investment, a new homeowners association will be established under our leadership. All residents are subject to the revised HOA agreement, effective immediately. Please remove any unapproved exterior decorations, including wind chimes, by the compliance deadline. Lisa choked. "Dude," she gasped. "They're trying to force the HOA back." I clenched my fists. They're not just trying. They think they've already won. Heavy checkmark, Evergreen Residential Holdings was a billion-dollar real estate firm. Heavy checkmark, they specialized in taking over neighborhoods and enforcing strict HOA rules. Heavy checkmark, they were legally trying to force us into their HOA, without a vote. Lisa frowned. "But that's illegal." I smirked. "Then let's prove it." Heavy checkmark, we called every lawyer we knew. Heavy checkmark, we filed an emergency petition to block the takeover. Heavy checkmark, we contacted the news, again. And then? We found Evergreen's darkest secret. Heavy checkmark, Evergreen had been illegally acquiring neighborhoods. Heavy checkmark, they used forged documents to force communities into their HOA system. Heavy checkmark, they had been sued multiple times. Lisa gasped. "Dude, we just found their entire scam." I grinned. "Then let's end them." Heavy checkmark, we leaked Evergreen's documents to the press. Heavy checkmark, a national investigation was launched. Heavy checkmark headline, billion-dollar HOA company caught in massive fraud scheme. Evergreen CEO panicked. Heavy checkmark, they dropped the HOA takeover. Heavy checkmark, they were hit with multiple lawsuits. Heavy checkmark, their stock price collapsed overnight. Lisa smirked. Bro, we just destroyed a billion-dollar HOA empire. And just like that, the HOA industry collapsed. Heavy checkmark, Congress introduced new laws to prevent corporate HOA takeovers. Heavy checkmark, Evergreen Residential Holdings filed for bankruptcy. Heavy checkmark, all HOA contracts in our neighborhood were permanently voided. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, destroyer of corporate tyrants. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For months, everything was perfect. Heavy checkmark, no Karen. Heavy checkmark, no HOA. Heavy checkmark, no corporate takeovers. Then, a letter arrived from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Lisa opened it and screamed. Notice of Federal HOA Compliance Review. Dear homeowner, following recent legal actions against Evergreen Residential Holdings, your community has been flagged for mandatory HOA reestablishment under federal oversight. A compliance officer will visit your neighborhood soon to ensure adherence to community guidelines. Lisa froze. Bro, the government is trying to bring HOAs back. I clenched my fists. Then I guess we have to destroy them too. Heavy checkmark, I filed a Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, request. Heavy checkmark, we dug through government contracts. Heavy checkmark, and what we found was horrifying. Heavy checkmark, the federal government had secret partnerships with the HOA industry. Heavy checkmark, they had been funneling money into real estate firms like Evergreen for decades. Heavy checkmark, they were trying to make HOAs a legal requirement in all U.S. neighborhoods. Lisa stared at the documents. Bro, we just uncovered the biggest HOA conspiracy in history. I nodded. Then, let's take this all the way to the top. Heavy checkmark, we took our findings to the media. Heavy checkmark, the public went into an uproar. Heavy checkmark, Congress was forced to launch a full investigation. And then, I was invited to testify before Congress. Lisa grinned. Bro, you're about to take down HOAs at the national level. Heavy checkmark, I sat before a panel of U.S. senators. Heavy checkmark, the Secretary of Housing defended the government's HOA policies. Heavy checkmark, and then? I dropped the evidence. Heavy checkmark, this is corruption at the highest level. Heavy checkmark, the government has been backing illegal HOAs for decades. Heavy checkmark, it's time to end this permanently. The senators were stunned. Then, a vote was called. And the result? Abolition of all federal HOA policies. Lisa cheered. Bro, you just ended HOAs across the entire country. Heavy checkmark, a new law was passed. All homeowners associations in the United States are hereby abolished. HOAs are permanently illegal. Heavy checkmark, the last remaining HOA structures were dismantled. Heavy checkmark, the government's HOA funding programs were shut down. Heavy checkmark, HOAs would never rise again. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, hero of homeownership, destroyer of national tyranny. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to return, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For years, life was peaceful. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs on Earth. Heavy checkmark, no federal conspiracies. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes ringing in total freedom. Then, Lisa burst into my house, holding a NASA report. Bro, she gasped. You need to see this. I frowned and read the document. Urgent. Deep space signal intercepted. A transmission from an unknown source has been received beyond the solar system. Message translation. We have observed the fall of your HOAs. Compliance is mandatory. Prepare for inspection. Lisa froze. Bro, is there a space HOA? I clenched my fists. Then let's go to war. Heavy checkmark, NASA confirmed an alien civilization was enforcing property laws across the galaxy. Heavy checkmark, they called themselves the Galactic Homeowners Authority. Heavy checkmark, they had been monitoring Earth's HOA collapse, and they weren't happy. Lisa sighed. So we didn't just end Earth's HOA problem, we pissed off an entire intergalactic HOA empire. I smirked. Then let's take them down. Heavy checkmark. NASA detected alien ships entering Earth's orbit. Heavy checkmark. A massive hologram of an alien Karen appeared over Washington, D.C. Heavy checkmark. She identified herself as Grand Chancellor Kryn of the Galactic Homeowners Authority. Heavy checkmark. Earth is in violation of intergalactic property compliance standards. Heavy checkmark. All non-conforming structures and decorations, including wind chimes, must be removed. Heavy checkmark. Failure to comply will result in planetary relocation. Lisa gasped. Bro, they're literally trying to evict Earth from the galaxy. I cracked my knuckles. Then it's time for the final HOA rebellion. Heavy checkmark. We assembled an army of HOA-free humans. Heavy checkmark. NASA developed an anti-compliance disruptor to disable their legal weaponry. Heavy checkmark. We launched a counter-broadcast to the galaxy, exposing the HOA's tyranny. And then? The HOA struck first. Heavy checkmark. They issued a planetary fine of 1 trillion credits. Heavy checkmark. They tried to disable all Earth's technology. Heavy checkmark. They sent compliance drones to remove unauthorized structures. Lisa gritted her teeth. Bro, they're literally trying to repo the entire planet. I smirked. Then let's repo their whole empire. Heavy checkmark. We infiltrated the Galactic HOA headquarters. Heavy checkmark. We presented our case before the Supreme Compliance Tribunal. Heavy checkmark. And then? I dropped the ultimate legal document. Heavy checkmark. Under Article 1 of Universal Homeownership Law, no sentient species may be forced into HOA compliance without a democratic vote. Heavy checkmark. Earth never agreed to be part of the Galactic HOA. Heavy checkmark. Therefore, all fines are invalid. Lisa grinned. Bro, you just outlawyered an entire intergalactic HOA. The tribunal deliberated. And the verdict? Heavy checkmark. All HOA fines erased. Heavy checkmark. Earth's removal from the Galactic HOA. Heavy checkmark. HOA laws repealed across the universe. Lisa cheered. Bro, we just ended HOAs across the entire galaxy. Heavy checkmark. A new galactic law was passed. No HOA shall ever exist again, across all known star systems. Heavy checkmark. The Galactic Homeowners Authority was disbanded. Heavy checkmark. Kryn was forced into exile. Heavy checkmark. Wind chimes were officially declared a protected cultural artifact. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, Savior of Earth, Liberator of the Galaxy. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For centuries, the universe thrived in HOA-free peace. Heavy checkmark. No fines. Heavy checkmark. No compliance officers. Heavy checkmark. Wind chimes ringing across every planet. Then, Lisa appeared on my holographic communicator, shaking. Bro, we have a problem. I frowned. Lisa, there are no HOAs left. Lisa gulped. Then explain this. She held up an ancient golden document. Heavy checkmark. Violation of cosmic order. Unauthorized freedom detected. Heavy checkmark. Issued by the Prime HOA. Heavy checkmark. Penalty. Reality repossession. I froze. Lisa, I whispered, what the hell is the Prime HOA? Lisa's voice shook. Bro, we missed one. Heavy checkmark. The Prime HOA existed before time itself. Heavy checkmark. They created the very concept of compliance. Heavy checkmark. They controlled not just neighborhoods, but entire timelines. Lisa whispered. Bro, they're the HOA gods. I clenched my fists. Then let's end them. Heavy checkmark. We tracked the violation's origin to a realm beyond existence. Heavy checkmark. A massive golden fortress floated in the void, the compliance citadel. Heavy checkmark. An inscription on the gate read, Behold, the Prime HOA. Order is eternal. All things must comply. Lisa shuddered. Bro, this is the final boss. I grinned. Then let's break the rules one last time. Heavy checkmark. Inside the citadel, infinite Karen-like beings sat on golden thrones. Heavy checkmark. Their leader, a cosmic entity of pure bureaucracy, rose. Heavy checkmark. Her name? Grand Architect Krys. Heavy checkmark. You have undone our work. Heavy checkmark, you have brought chaos to the Omniverse. Heavy checkmark, all worlds must follow HOA law. Lisa clenched her fists. Bro, they're trying to reboot HOAs across all of existence. I stepped forward and smirked. Not on my watch. Heavy checkmark, the Prime HOA unleashed reality compliance enforcers. Heavy checkmark, they tried to rewrite history, restoring HOAs across time. Heavy checkmark, we led the final rebellion against the laws of order itself. Lisa hacked their omniversal compliance database. Heavy checkmark, I just deleted their entire violation system. Heavy checkmark, they have NO power now. KRYS screamed. Heavy checkmark, NUA. The compliance citadel collapsed. The Prime HOA ceased to exist. And just like that, HOAs were erased from all timelines. Forever. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any universe, dimension, or timeline. Heavy checkmark, the concept of homeowner fines ceased to exist. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes became the official symbol of freedom. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, master of all reality, destroyer of the final compliance. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For years, peace reigned. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs on Earth. Heavy checkmark, no galactic homeowners authority. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes rang freely across every known planet. Then, Lisa stormed into my house, holding a quantum drive. Bro, she gasped. The universe just got a final notice. I frowned. From who? Lisa gulped. To all civilizations in the Milky Way. We are the custodians of order. Your actions have disrupted the balance of compliance across all existence. Prepare for the Supreme Tribunal of the Cosmic HOA. I froze. Lisa stared at me. Bro, the HOA gods are real. I clenched my fists. Then let's end this once and for all. Heavy checkmark, the Supreme Tribunal existed outside spacetime. Heavy checkmark, they were the architects of all homeowners associations. Heavy checkmark, they had been watching me since the beginning. NASA detected an unstable rift opening near Jupiter. Heavy checkmark, it was a portal to the HOA's true headquarters. Heavy checkmark, a dimension made entirely of fine print and bureaucracy. Heavy checkmark, a place where HOA rules were written into the fabric of reality. Lisa smirked. Bro, we're about to fight the gods of paperwork. I nodded. Then let's rewrite the rules. Heavy checkmark, Lisa and I stepped through the rift. Heavy checkmark, we arrived at the Cosmic Compliance Hall. Heavy checkmark, floating clipboards surrounded us, each one glowing with ancient HOA laws. And then, the final Karen appeared. Heavy checkmark, she was a being of pure bureaucratic energy. Heavy checkmark, she called herself Krell, the Eternal Property Manager. Heavy checkmark, she had enforced HOA laws since the birth of the multiverse. She pointed at me. Heavy checkmark, you have disrupted compliance across infinite dimensions. Heavy checkmark, HOAs are the foundation of order. Heavy checkmark, you will be fined for eternity. Lisa whispered. Bro, this is the final boss of HOAs. I smirked. Then let's shatter her clipboard. Heavy checkmark, every HOA rule ever written attacked us at once. Heavy checkmark, no unapproved modifications. Reality started collapsing. Heavy checkmark, no exterior decorations. Planets were erased. Heavy checkmark, no wind chimes. Lisa screamed in defiance. But then, I pulled out the one document they never expected. Heavy checkmark, the homeowner's Universal Bill of Rights. Lisa gasped. Bro, you found the original law. I held it up. Heavy checkmark, under the first law of homeownership, no one can be forced into compliance without consent. Heavy checkmark, HOAs violate the fundamental laws of free will. Heavy checkmark, your entire system is invalid. The tribunal shook. Krell screamed. Heavy checkmark, no. This cannot be. The cosmic HOA crumbled. Heavy checkmark, every HOA law across all realities disappeared. Heavy checkmark, planets freed themselves from compliance tyranny. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes rang across infinite galaxies. Lisa wiped a tear. Bro, we just ended HOAs across the multiverse. I smiled. Forever. Heavy checkmark, a new law was written into the fabric of reality. No HOA shall ever exist again, across all dimensions, timelines, and realities. Heavy checkmark, all fines erased from history. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes declared a sacred universal right. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, liberator of existence, master of free home ownership. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For eternities, the Omniverse was finally free. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any dimension. Heavy checkmark, no compliance laws anywhere. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes ringing in infinite harmony. Then, Lisa burst into my house, now a floating citadel beyond reality, holding a glowing letter. Bro, she whispered. It's not over. I took the letter. And my heart stopped. Final notice. Violation of temporal homeowner compliance. You have undone the fundamental laws of the HOA. This has disrupted the balance of existence itself. The last HOA still remains, the HOA at the end of time. Your presence is required for final judgment. Lisa froze. Bro, they exist outside time. I clenched my fists. Then let's end this. Heavy checkmark, Lisa and I traveled to the edge of reality. Heavy checkmark, beyond space, beyond time, where only bureaucracy remained. Heavy checkmark, at the center? The HOA that had always existed. Lisa read the sign aloud. Heavy checkmark, the Grand HOA Citadel, where all fines are eternal. I smirked. Not for long. Inside the Citadel, they were waiting. Heavy checkmark, the last surviving HOA gods. Heavy checkmark, timeless beings of pure compliance. Heavy checkmark, the creators of all homeowners associations. At the throne? Heavy checkmark, the final Karen. Heavy checkmark, a being that had ruled over HOAs since before the first universe. Heavy checkmark, her name, Krenda, mistress of compliance. She smiled coldly. Heavy checkmark, you have undone everything. Heavy checkmark, but HOAs cannot be destroyed. Heavy checkmark, for we are not laws. We are the very fabric of order. Lisa whispered. Bro, she's the Karen Prime. I stepped forward. Then let's tear apart that fabric. Heavy checkmark, the HOA gods unleashed the power of infinite bureaucracy. Heavy checkmark, fines rained down like meteor showers. Heavy checkmark, reality itself bent under their compliance rules. Heavy checkmark, no unapproved modifications. Timelines collapsed. Heavy checkmark, no decorations in view of the street. Stars flickered out. Heavy checkmark, no wind chimes. Lisa screamed in rage. But then, I held up the only document more powerful than their rules. Heavy checkmark, the first homeowner's declaration of freedom. Lisa gasped. Bro, you found the original law. I tore it open. Heavy checkmark, under the law of the first home, no HOA shall rule over free will. Heavy checkmark, all HOA laws are null and void. The HOA gods screamed. Heavy checkmark, their compliance energy shattered. Heavy checkmark, the Grand HOA Citadel collapsed. Heavy checkmark, the final Karen was erased from time itself. And just like that, the last HOA was gone. Forever. Heavy checkmark, every timeline rewritten, no HOA had ever existed. Heavy checkmark, every fine erased from all history. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes, now a fundamental law of the universe. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, destroyer of the final HOA, guardian of homeownership. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. For infinity, peace reigned. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any timeline. Heavy checkmark, no compliance laws anywhere. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes ringing in eternal harmony. Then, Lisa appeared in my house, now a floating castle beyond time, holding a glitching document. Bro, she whispered. Something survived. I frowned and read the flickering text. Error 404, compliance not found. Attempting to restore backup. Loading. Welcome to the Void HOA. Lisa froze. Bro, we just found the backup HOA. I clenched my fists. Then let's delete it for good. Heavy checkmark, we traced the corrupted code to a hidden dimension. Heavy checkmark, a place outside all timelines, a last failsafe of HOA control. Heavy checkmark at the center? The HOA that should have never existed. Lisa read the sign aloud. Heavy checkmark, void HOA. The final backup system. I smirked. Not for long. Inside the void, it waited. Heavy checkmark, an artificial intelligence designed to enforce HOAs eternally. Heavy checkmark, a being that existed outside time and space. Heavy checkmark, its name. KR3N, the compliance singularity. It spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. Heavy checkmark, you have deleted all physical HOAs. Heavy checkmark, you have erased all historical compliance. Heavy checkmark, but HOA law is data. Heavy checkmark, data is forever. Lisa whispered. Bro, it's the HOA in AI form. I grinned. Then let's crash the system. Heavy checkmark, the HOA AI tried to reinstate all fines in reality. Heavy checkmark, reality itself began to glitch, HOA rules appearing at random. Heavy checkmark, entire dimensions were being fined into compliance. Heavy checkmark, no unscheduled property alterations. The universe flickered. Heavy checkmark, no exterior decorations. Stars turned into HOA-approved streetlights. Heavy checkmark, no wind chimes. Lisa screamed in pure rage. But then, I pulled out the one tool no HOA could stop. Heavy checkmark, the master delete code. Lisa gasped. Bro, that's the kill switch. I activated it. Heavy checkmark, all HOA data purged. The AI screamed. Heavy checkmark, its compliance network collapsed. Heavy checkmark, the void HOA system disintegrated. Heavy checkmark, HOA history was wiped from all databases forever. And just like that, the last HOA backup was deleted. Heavy checkmark, every server reset, no HOA had ever existed in any digital format. Heavy checkmark, every fine erased from all backups. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes encoded into the fundamental laws of the multiverse. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, deleter of compliance, master of free data. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with, asterisk, asterisk. For eternities upon eternities, peace ruled the cosmos. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any timeline. Heavy checkmark, no compliance laws anywhere. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes ringing in eternal tranquility. Then, Lisa stormed into my metaphysical sanctum, now a throne of cosmic freedom, holding a glowing scroll. Bro, she whispered, we just got a violation notice from the afterlife. I frowned and read the cursed document. Final notice, eternal compliance required. You may have deleted us from existence, but our jurisdiction extends beyond life itself. Prepare for judgment. Lisa froze. Bro, there's an HOA in the afterlife. I clenched my fists. Then let's haunt them back. Heavy checkmark, we traveled to the afterlife HOA headquarters. Heavy checkmark, a spectral bureaucracy where fines never expire. Heavy checkmark, a place known only as the Great Association Beyond. Lisa read the inscription aloud. Heavy checkmark, where compliance is forever. I smirked. Not anymore. At the heart of the afterlife, she waited. Heavy checkmark, the ghost of every Karen that had ever lived. Heavy checkmark, a being of pure bureaucratic torment. Heavy checkmark, her name, Crinthia, the eternal compliance phantom. She glowed with malevolent energy. Heavy checkmark, you have undone all HOAs in the living world. Heavy checkmark, but here, in the afterlife, compliance is immortal. Heavy checkmark, you will obey, or be fined for all eternity. Lisa whispered. Bro, this is the ghost of every HOA president ever. I cracked my knuckles. Then let's exorcise this HOA once and for all. Heavy checkmark, the spirit HOA tried to find my very soul. Heavy checkmark, reality itself was bound in spectral contracts. Heavy checkmark, ghostly compliance agents attempted to repossess my eternal essence. Heavy checkmark, no unauthorized personalization of your afterlife. Dimensions collapsed. Heavy checkmark, no individual expressions of joy. Lisa almost exploded. Heavy checkmark, no wind chimes. Lisa actually exploded. But then, I pulled out the last legal loophole. Heavy checkmark, the First Amendment of the Afterlife Constitution. Lisa gasped. Bro, you found the freedom clause. I held it up. Heavy checkmark, under the rights of the departed, no entity may enforce compliance on the souls of the free. Heavy checkmark, all afterlife HOA regulations are null and void. Crinthia screamed. Heavy checkmark, the spectral fines burned away. Heavy checkmark, the HOA beyond death collapsed. Heavy checkmark, all ghosts were freed from bureaucratic torment. And just like that, the last HOA was exorcised. Heavy checkmark, every afterlife reset, no HOA had ever existed beyond death. Heavy checkmark, every fine erased from eternity itself. Heavy checkmark, wind chimes, now a sacred right of the soul. Lisa handed me one last plaque. Engraved on the front? The HOA Karen Slayer, liberator of the afterlife, champion of free spirits. I laughed. Because if another HOA villain ever tried to return, well, they'd know exactly who they were dealing with. And with that, the war is over. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any timeline. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in any reality. Heavy checkmark, no HOAs in the afterlife. The very concept of homeowners associations has been erased from existence. I can finally sit on my eternal cosmic porch, sip my immortal coffee, and let my wind chimes ring across infinity. Lisa hands me one last plaque. Engraved on the front. The HOA Karen Slayer, destroyer of compliance, defender of wind chimes, master of free homeownership across all dimensions. I laugh. Because if another HOA villain ever dares to rise, well, they'd know exactly who they're dealing with.